What happens when greed takes over a heart meant to serve God? Gehazi, the trusted servant of the prophet Elisha, had the privilege of witnessing incredible miracles and God's power firsthand. Yet, his story ended in tragedy, marked by deceit and a curse that changed his destiny forever. In this video, we'll explore the life of Gehazi, his fateful decision, and the powerful lessons his story holds for our lives today. As we dive into Gehazi's story, you'll uncover how unchecked desires can lead to spiritual downfall, and how even those closest to God's work are not immune to temptation. This video will challenge you to examine your own heart, seek integrity, and understand the importance of obedience and humility in your walk with God. Gehazi's life serves as a warning and a lesson for anyone striving to live faithfully. If you find this message meaningful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can share these important lessons with others who need them. Let's uncover the story of Gehazi and what it means for us today. Gehazi served as a trusted servant of Elisha, one of Israel's greatest prophets. He was not just a helper but had a front-row seat to the many miracles that Elisha performed in the name of God. Gehazi witnessed firsthand the power of God at work, including the incredible healing of Naaman, the Syrian general, who was cured of leprosy after following Elisha's instructions. Gehazi's close relationship with Elisha gave him the privilege to be involved in these miraculous events, but it also made his later actions all the more tragic. Elisha, a prophet of God, played a vital role during a time of great moral and spiritual decline in Israel. As the successor of Elijah, Elisha was chosen by God to continue his work, performing miracles to demonstrate God's power and care for his people. He healed the sick, performed many other wonders, and brought guidance to Israel. Elisha's role was crucial in reminding the people of Israel that God was still present and active, even when they were struggling with their faith. At this time, Israel's spiritual state was troubled. The people often turned away from God, worshipping idols and ignoring the prophets. Israel was facing significant political and social challenges, and many of the leaders and people of the nation were not following God's laws. This instability made it even more important for God to raise up a faithful servant like Elisha, who could perform miracles to demonstrate God's power and call the people back to righteousness. Gehazi, as Elisha's servant, was part of this critical time in Israel's history. In this context of spiritual decline and corruption, Gehazi's role as Elisha's servant was significant. He was supposed to be a helper in spreading God's message and witnessing the miracles that showed God's power. However, his story took a dark turn when his personal greed and lack of integrity led him to make decisions that were in direct contrast to the character and teachings of Elisha. His actions stand out even more against the backdrop of a nation in desperate need of true leadership and moral guidance. Elisha's prophetic ministry was marked by his unwavering commitment to God's will, no matter the political or social challenges. He showed the people that God was still in control, and through him, God performed acts of mercy, justice, and power. Gehazi, who was part of this ministry, had the unique opportunity to be involved in God's work in a powerful way. Yet, his failure to live up to the trust placed in him serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and disobedience, especially when the need for faithfulness is most pressing. The state of Israel and the pivotal role of Elisha set the stage for Gehazi's story. While Israel needed leaders like Elisha to call them back to God, Gehazi's actions reflect the personal struggles people face in living up to God's calling. In a time when the nation was faltering, Gehazi's greed not only betrayed Elisha but also dishonored the mission he was supposed to serve. This highlights the importance of maintaining integrity, especially when one is in a position of trust within God's work. Naaman, the commander of the Syrian army, had been suffering from leprosy for many years. Desperate for a cure, he sought help from Elisha, the prophet of God. Elisha instructed him to wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and when Naaman obeyed, his leprosy was miraculously healed. This healing was a powerful demonstration of God's grace and power, showing that no one is beyond the reach of God's mercy, even a foreign commander like Naaman. It was a moment of great spiritual significance for Naaman, who realized that the God of Israel was the true healer. After being healed, Naaman was overwhelmed with gratitude and offered Elisha gifts as a sign of thanks. He brought with him silver, gold, and fine clothes, hoping to reward the prophet for his miraculous work. However, Elisha refused the gifts, making it clear that the healing had nothing to do with any material compensation. Elisha's refusal highlighted an important principle: God's work cannot be bought, and His grace is freely given. This moment underscores Elisha's integrity, as he did not seek personal gain from the miracles he performed but remained humble, focused on serving God's will. Despite Elisha's refusal, Gehazi, the servant who had been present during the healing, saw an opportunity for personal gain. As Elisha dismissed Naaman's gifts, Gehazi's greed began to take hold of him. He thought to himself that he deserved a share of the rewards that Naaman had offered, believing that Elisha's refusal was an opportunity he could exploit. Gehazi decided to secretly pursue Naaman, hoping to take some of the gifts for himself. Gehazi's actions revealed his internal conflict between his role as a servant of God and his desire for material wealth. While Elisha had demonstrated humility and faithfulness, Gehazi was driven by selfish desires. He lied to Elisha, telling him that Naaman had sent him to collect the gifts, even though this was not the truth. This deception not only exposed Gehazi's greed but also his lack of trust in God's provision, as he sought to take what he believed was owed to him rather than waiting for God's blessings in his own time. When Gehazi returned with the gifts, Elisha immediately confronted him. He asked where Gehazi had gone, and Gehazi lied again, trying to cover up his actions. Elisha, however, knew exactly what had happened, for God had revealed it to him. In that moment, Gehazi's dishonesty and greed were exposed, and Elisha pronounced a curse on him. Gehazi would suffer the consequences of his actions, and his life would be marked by the same leprosy that Naaman had once had. The story of Naaman and Gehazi's greed serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of greed and dishonesty. While Naaman's healing was a testimony to God's power and grace, Gehazi's actions show the destructive nature of covetousness and the consequences of seeking material gain at the expense of God's will. This story calls us to examine our own hearts, ensuring that we are living in integrity and trusting God to provide for us, rather than being swayed by selfish desires. Gehazi, in an attempt to cover up his actions, lied to Elisha. When Elisha asked where he had been, Gehazi denied everything, pretending that nothing had occurred. He tried to maintain his facade, thinking he could deceive the prophet. However, Gehazi underestimated Elisha's role as a prophet of God. Elisha, who was deeply connected to God, immediately knew that Gehazi was lying. This highlights a crucial point. No matter how much we try to hide our actions, nothing can be hidden from God, who sees all things. Elisha's response to Gehazi was stern and filled with righteous anger. He confronted Gehazi with the truth of his actions and exposed his greed and dishonesty. Elisha revealed that Gehazi had lied, betrayed his trust, and sought personal gain at the expense of God's command. In response, Elisha pronounced a severe punishment. Gehazi would be struck with leprosy, the same disease that Naaman had been healed from. This punishment was not just a personal consequence for Gehazi, but a public one as well, serving as a powerful reminder of the dangers of sin and disobedience. The consequences of Gehazi's greed were immediate and severe. Just as Naaman was once afflicted with leprosy, Gehazi was now struck with the same disease, symbolizing the outcome of his actions. This dramatic turn of events demonstrated how far Gehazi had fallen. From being a trusted servant of Elisha to becoming a leper, Gehazi's story serves as a tragic reminder that unchecked greed and dishonesty can lead to irreversible consequences. His actions not only cost him his health but also his position as Elisha's servant and his future in the community. The moral lesson of Gehazi's story is clear. Greed and dishonesty are dangerous temptations that can destroy a person's life and their relationship with God. Gehazi's downfall shows how seeking material gain at the expense of integrity can result in lasting consequences. His actions were driven by a desire for wealth and status, but in the end, those things led him to ruin. This is a powerful lesson for all of us, reminding us to prioritize honesty, integrity, and trust in God over the pursuit of personal gain. Gehazi's story also teaches us the importance of remaining faithful and trustworthy in our relationships, especially when we are entrusted with responsibilities. Elisha, as a prophet, had given Gehazi a position of trust, but Gehazi betrayed that trust due to his greed. This breach of trust not only affected his personal life but also his standing in the community. Trust is a foundation of all relationships, and when broken, it can lead to great loss, as seen in Gehazi's tragic fate. Gehazi's story calls us to reflect on our own lives and the choices we make. Are we driven by greed or the pursuit of material gain? Do we make compromises in our values for short-term rewards? Gehazi's life reminds us that trusting in God's provision and living with integrity are the keys to a life that pleases God. If we hold fast to these principles, we can avoid the traps that led Gehazi to his downfall and live a life that honors God. Gehazi's story serves as a powerful warning against greed, both in biblical times and today. In our modern world, many people are driven by the pursuit of wealth, often valuing material success over moral integrity. Just like Gehazi, who sought personal gain at the expense of his relationship with God and others, many are tempted to cut corners or act dishonestly to achieve their desires. The consequences of such actions, as seen in Gehazi's life, can be severe, resulting in loss of reputation, relationships, and even spiritual connection. His downfall shows that greed can cloud our judgment and lead to irreversible damage, no matter how small the initial decision may seem. Deception, as demonstrated in Gehazi's actions, is another key lesson we can learn from his story. Gehazi lied to Elisha, believing he could escape the consequences of his greed. However, his deception was uncovered, and he faced harsh punishment. This teaches us that even small lies, which might seem harmless or justified in the moment, can have destructive consequences. Lying, especially to gain something material or to hide wrongdoing, often leads to broken trust and damage to one's character. Gehazi's failure reminds us that honesty is always the best choice, as dishonesty erodes not only our relationships with others but also our relationship with God. Integrity, as exemplified by Elisha, is another crucial lesson from Gehazi's story. Elisha remained faithful to God's commands and did not seek personal gain, even when it was offered to him. His refusal to accept Naaman's gifts highlights the importance of living with integrity, regardless of external temptations. Elisha's life shows us that true strength comes from trusting God and living according to His will, not by seeking shortcuts or rewards that are not aligned with His purposes. By trusting in God's provision and remaining steadfast in our principles, we can live a life that honors God and inspires others to do the same. For those watching today, Gehazi's story challenges us to reflect on our own actions and decisions. Are we, at times, driven by the desire for material success or personal gain, even when it compromises our values? Do we allow ourselves to be tempted by greed or dishonesty, thinking that small compromises won't matter in the long run? The consequences Gehazi faced show that even small actions, motivated by selfishness, can lead to far-reaching negative outcomes. It's essential to reflect on our motivations and choose to act with integrity, even when it's hard. In today's fast-paced world, where instant gratification and success are often prioritized, the lesson of integrity becomes even more important. Trusting in God's provision, like Elisha, is a valuable reminder that material wealth and success are fleeting, but living in alignment with God's will brings lasting fulfillment. Instead of seeking to gain through dishonest means, we should focus on building a life rooted in trust, honesty, and faith. This will help us maintain peace of mind and avoid the consequences that come from pursuing selfish ambitions. Gehazi's story is a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences, both in the short term and the long term. While we may not always see the immediate effects of greed, lying, or dishonesty, these actions eventually come to light. By striving to live a life of integrity, truth, and trust in God, we not only avoid the pitfalls that Gehazi fell into but also set a positive example for others. Just as Elisha remained true to God's will, we too can find strength in following God's path, trusting that He will provide for us in ways that far exceed anything material wealth can offer. To recap the key points of Gehazi's story, His greed led him to deceive Elisha, and his desire for material gain ultimately resulted in him being cursed with leprosy. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of dishonesty and the importance of living with integrity. Gehazi's actions, driven by selfishness, not only caused harm to himself but also showed how greed can lead us away from God's purposes. His downfall teaches us the importance of trusting in God and maintaining a heart of honesty and humility. As we reflect on Gehazi's story, it's important to think about how we can avoid similar pitfalls in our own lives. How often do we, like Gehazi, allow greed or the temptation of quick gain to cloud our judgment? We should all take time to examine our hearts and actions. How can we guard against greed and dishonesty? How can we strive to live with integrity, both in our personal lives and in our professional conduct? The choices we make today can have lasting effects, so it is crucial to live in a way that honors God and reflects His truth. Integrity is at the core of a godly life. Just like Elisha, who remained faithful to God and acted with integrity, we too are called to follow God's will and uphold His truth. When we do this, we avoid the traps of greed and dishonesty. Our lives become a testament to the power of God's love and grace, and we can experience true fulfillment, not based on material wealth, but on living according to God's purpose. Gehazi's story offers a valuable lesson. The consequences of greed and deceit are not always immediate, but they are inevitable. His desire for material gain led him to betray the trust placed in him, resulting in the loss of his health, position, and integrity. This serves as a stark reminder that nothing is hidden from God. Even when we think we can hide our actions, God sees all, and He calls us to live with honesty, integrity, and a heart that seeks His will above all. As we go forward in our daily lives, let's remember that our actions, big and small, have consequences. When faced with temptations or moments of doubt, we can choose to follow the example of those who live by God's standards, like Elisha. We are called to trust in God's provision, to be honest, and to avoid the snare of greed. Doing so will bring us peace and fulfillment that cannot be found in the fleeting things of this world. To close, let's reflect on a verse from Proverbs 11 verse 1. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with Him. This verse reminds us that integrity and honesty are not just virtues we should aspire to, but they are also actions that honor God. Let us remember that, as we live according to His will, we will find favor in His eyes, and our lives will reflect His goodness to others.